In this video, I'm gonna show you 3 super creamy and flavorful ice cream recipes for the Ninja Creamy that only take about 15 minutes of active prep time. Once I show you the base recipes for the ice cream, I'm also gonna show you some mix-ins to take them from simple and delicious to maximally hedonistic. If you don't own a creamy though, I'm also gonna show you a simpler method that I use to make smooth and creamy ice cream at home without one. First, I'm gonna show you the most classic flavor of all time, vanilla. But this is not boring vanilla. This version is rich, decadent, and perfumed with super intense floral vanilla flavor. To get started, I'll grab a deep saucepan and drop it on the stove. Then I'll add in 600 grams of heavy cream and 300 grams of whole milk. Next, I'll whisk those two to combine real quick. Then I'll heat them up over pretty low heat. Anything higher than medium here and scorching becomes a real threat. 2 to 3 minutes later, I've got my dairies heated into the ballpark of 190F. From here, I'll set the hot pot aside, then jump over into a bowl where I have 7 cracked large eggs, and I'll separate out the yolks. I like to do that by passing the whole egg between my fingers and letting the white slough off, because I find that it doesn't break the yolk as often as the Italian Nona method, where you're passing the yolk back and forth between 2 shells. And once I've got 7 large yolks in a bowl, I'll add in 120 grams of sugar and a small pinch of salt, which is about 1/2 of a teaspoon. In ice cream base, a little bit of salt goes a long way. Next, I'll jump in with the whisk and stir the sugar, salt, and yolks together. And that's the base of our custard. Now we have to temper in the cream. From that, I'll grab my hot pot from the stove and then drop in a big ladle full into the yolks, and then immediately whisk that together so that the yolks don't get cooked. Then, once that's whisked in, I'll repeat this about 3 more times or until half of the dairy is whisked in. This tempering process gradually brings up the temperature of the yolks, which helps prevent them from scrambling when we go to cook this custard. If you skip this step and just heat everything together straight from the fridge, it would take a really long time and expose the yolks to higher heat, which would significantly increase the risk of them scrambling. Once about half of the cream is whisked in, I'll just pour in the rest while whisking. This will bring the whole mixture up to about 180F, which is quite close to the final cooked temperature that we're looking for. So we're not gonna have to babysit and stir this while cooking for very long. Next, I'll pour the tempered custard base back into my saucepan, then I'll drop it back on the stove over medium-low heat. From here, I need to cook the yolks in the custard to make it safe to eat and, more importantly, to thicken it up. From this point forward, we need to continuously stir this custard base with a spatula to keep it from scrambling. By the way, if you're wondering what an overcooked custard looks like, not good. The good news is that it's actually pretty hard to break this custard. The final cook temperature that we're looking for is 195, which is well below boiling, which is around the point where the eggs start to get curdled. So you'd really have to neglect stirring this for a long time to get it to scramble this badly. But if you really don't trust your ability to cook this custard directly over a flame, a more foolproof method is to drop a medium bowl over about 4 inches of boiling water in a large pot, then pour the ice cream base into that bowl and whisk it until the steam underneath cooks the custard to 195. This is a more gentle way to cook the custard because the heat underneath maxes out at the boiling point of water. The problem with double boiling is that it's really slow, so you have to stir this for about 15 to 20 minutes to get it cooked. That being said, a tiny bit of curdling here and there is totally okay because the ice cream base is going to get destroyed by a high RPM metal blade once it's frozen, and that should break up a couple of small curds here and there. Back at the saucepan, after about 3 to 4 minutes of stirring, this custard is at about 195F and it's thickened up to have more of a silky, velvety texture. Now, to keep this custard from carryover cooking into that boiled mess you just saw, I'm gonna move it over to a metal bowl as soon as it hits 195F. Now, to make this base into vanilla ice cream, I'm gonna add in 1 full vanilla beans worth of pulp. To prep this vanilla, I just sliced the bean from end to end, then opened it up like a book and scraped the inside of the bean to get all the seeds and paste out with the back of my paring knife. In total, this yields about 3 grams of fresh vanilla paste, and it cost me about $7. But in my opinion, it's worth every penny. If you can't find a whole bean, or if you're not gonna spend that money, a cheaper option would be vanilla bean paste. They say that there's over 4 vanilla beans in each tube of this stuff, which I find sus, but I'll admit that this product isn't bad. The vanilla is preserved in glucose syrup and citric acid to be shelf stable, and that gives it a bit of its own taste that isn't great, but it's pretty vanilla-y, and in my opinion, it beats standard issue vanilla extract. If you're gonna use this over a whole bean, sub in 20 grams worth. Okay, now I'm just gonna quickly whisk in the vanilla paste, and if you're wondering why I didn't infuse this paste into the custard while I was cooking it to make things more vanilla-y, that's because the threat of curdling the custard is low but real, and I don't wanna have to throw out my expensive vanilla vanilla alongside some curdled eggs. Next, I'll move this bowl over to the fridge uncovered to cool it down and let it steam off. Pre-cooling uncovered speeds up freezing and prevents steam from condensing around the custard in the creamy containers, which can make the ice cream taste a little bit icy and crunchy around the edges. 30 minutes later, the base is closer to room temperature, so now I'm gonna pour this into creamy pint containers, pop on a lid, then throw them into my freezer for at least 20 hours, but preferably like 24 or even 30. If you don't have a creamy, at this point, pour your custard into an ice cube tray, but it has to be a silicone tipped tray. Regular ice cube trays make it very, very hard to pop out the frozen ice cream base for some reason, but the silicone allows you to push these from the bottom up and they pop out no problem. Once the custard is spread evenly between the two trays, I'll throw both into the freezer to get these frozen solid. The next day, I'll pop my cubes into a food processor and then spin until things are broken down into a smooth puree. Chopping it down warmed it up a little bit though, and now it's just a little bit on the melty side. So next I need to move this over to a pint container and then throw it back into the freezer to set up for 1 more hour. 1 hour later, we've got good ice cream made without an ice cream machine. It's creamy, it's very light, and it's overall nice. My only critique is that it's just a tiny bit icy compared to what we're about to make, which is insanely smooth. But this process works well, and I think it's worth making. Back to the main character ice cream. After a night in the freezer, this thing is frozen all the way to the core. Now I'm gonna pop on the blade and safety lid, then I'm gonna throw this little MF onto my Ninja Creamy, then hit the ice cream button. If you guys wanted to experiment, you could of course try the gelato button too. That just spins the blade at a slightly slower RPM, which incorporates less air into the custard, which gives you something that has a denser, more velvety texture that feels a little bit more heavy on your palate. It's up to you, both are good. And after a quick spin, wow, we've got beautiful vanilla ice cream that's super creamy and super firm, which I love. Most of the creamy recipes that I've seen on the internet make icy, melty, thin ice cream. This stuff has some nice professional level structure to it thanks to that cooked on glaze, or the cooked custard. Now let's taste it. Wow. This makes store-bought vanilla ice cream look so stupid, you guys. Flavor-wise, the vanilla here is super pure. It's warm, it's exotic, it's very deeply floral. It's creamy, it's smooth, it's silky, it's luxurious and eggy. If you're somebody who's just kind of mid on vanilla ice cream, then I think you should try this because this is way more than just a mix-in ice cream. This is a wonderful standalone flavor that's just as good as chocolate or strawberry or mint or anything else. Speaking of mix-ins though, if you're a real piece of shit and you want to max this thing out, here's how to turn it into cookie dough ice cream. First, let's make some super easy cookie dough that's also safe to eat raw. I'll start by putting one very well-tempered stick of butter into a bowl, then add in 50 grams of white sugar, 100 grams of brown sugar, and a 5-gram pinch of salt. Next, I'll grab a firm spatula and just smush the butter into the sugar until everything is homogeneous. Then I'll add in 165 grams of all-purpose flour, 65 grams of water to replace the moisture from the raw eggs, and then 3 grams of vanilla extract. By the way, I baked this all-purpose flour at 300F for 15 minutes to sterilize it so that you can eat it raw. Next, I'll just stir the flour into the sugar and butter. And by the way, I'm showing you how to do this with just a bowl and a spatula to keep this process as gear-free as possible for you guys. But if you have a stand mixer, of course, this mix would come together with less elbow grease. Once combined, I'll add in 100 grams of mini chocolate chips and then fold those in. Next, I'll take about 150 grams of this cookie dough and ball it up into marble-sized pieces and then lay it out on a plate or a sheet tray and then throw it into the freezer to set up until it's mix-in time. By the way, the other half of this cookie dough is great for snacking on, or you can freeze it for the next batch of ice cream base. The next day, I'm gonna add 75 grams of my cookie dough chunks into a spun up pint of vanilla ice cream, then pop it on the creamy and hit mix it. And that's how you make chocolate chip cookie dough ice cream from scratch. This version has so much more flavor than store-bought, and more importantly, it has so much more cookie dough per bite. Man, I just love how these frozen chunks of cookie dough are crunchy in spots and then soft and chewy in others. It's amazing. Another solid mix-in if you don't want to make your own cookie dough is to mix in your favorite baked cookie for a cookies and cream ice cream. I just baked off 4 giant snickerdoodle cookies from Wild Grain, the sponsor of this video. Once they were cooled down, I crumbled them on top of a spun pint of vanilla base and then ran the mix-in setting. I love this cookies and cream option because you get some butteriness from the cookies along with some crunchiness because they're already baked and all of that sugary cinnamon flavor. It's almost like Cinnamon Toast Crunch ice cream. If you haven't heard of Wild Grain, I've been using their subscription boxes for the last few months, and I really like what they're doing. For starters, they partner with small bakeries from across the country that specialize in sourdough, pastries, and fresh pasta, and that really comes across in the product. It's really nice stuff. Even though I used to bake bread professionally, I have no shame when I pull a loaf of Wild Grain sourdough out of the freezer to serve along with dinner. It's just very good bread that happens to be super convenient and quick. With Wild Grain, everything bakes in about 25 minutes or less. In my last subscription box, they sent me snickerdoodle cookies, lemon ginger biscuits, ciabatta sandwich rolls, rigatoni pasta, a loaf of sourdough, and croissants. Oh, and by the way, right now, if you sign up for Wild Grain using my link, you'll get those croissants for free for life, plus $30 off your first subscription box. Wild Grain's boxes are fully customizable, so you can pick whatever products you like best. Definitely get the sourdough and the croissants though. Those are my favorite. I'll leave the link in my description. Thank you, Wild Grain. Up next is what I'm calling maximum chocolate ice cream. To make it, I'll heat 500 grams of cream and 250 grams of whole milk. Just like for the vanilla, I'll heat this until it's about 190 F. Then I'll add in 100 grams of dark chocolate chips. These are 70% cacao, but if you like it lighter, sub in milk chocolate. Now I'll just stir in those chips until they're melted, and I've got something that resembles chocolate milk. From here, I'll kill the heat, then set the chocolate pot off to the side so I can mix up my eggs and stuff. From here, I'll add 6 large egg yolks into a bowl. Ugh, one of them broke. Next, in goes 80 grams of sugar, 30 grams of cocoa. By the way, I'm using a 50-50 blend of regular and Dutch processed cocoa, but all regular cocoa would also work fine. Then I'll add in a pinch of salt and then jump in and whisk until everything is combined. Wait a minute, I also need to add in some vanilla, which is a great supporting character for chocolate. In goes 10 grams of the vanilla paste I showed you earlier, or 2 to 3 grams of vanilla extract. Okay, back to whisking. I'll get the vanilla, eggs, sugar, and cocoa all combined. Then I'll grab my hot chocolate milk from the stove and then ladle it in to temper it with the eggs, just like I did for the vanilla. Right away though, you can see that the cocoa and eggs are really thick, so the first couple of additions of cream and milk are going to take a little bit of elbow grease to get combined, and then after maybe the third or fourth ladleful, things come together and the egg base should be warmed enough to just switch over to pouring in the hot chocolate milk. And once cream, milk, sugar, and eggs are all combined, I'm going to move this custard base back into my saucepan, then I'll drop it on the stove over medium-low heat. I want to reiterate at this point that it's very important that once the yolks are in and the pot is on heat, you'll need to stir this constantly. Also, don't use a wooden spoon or a whisk here. That's not going to scrape the bottom enough and the custard will settle, stick to the bottom, and get cooked into a chocolate omelet. And once this custard is at about 195 F, I'll immediately move it over to a bowl to stop the cooking process. Even if the saucepan's off heat, the custard will keep cooking because it's so hot. From here, I'll drop this bowl into the fridge to cool things down. 30 minutes later, I'm gonna split this custard between 2 clean Ninja Creamy pints. Then I'll move the ice cream base over to the freezer to set up for 24 hours. The next day, I've got a block of frozen chocolate that's dying to get beat up by a 1200 RPM blade. So I'll pop the pint into the creamy and then press the button. And there we go. Maximum chocolate ice cream. It's decadent, it's mature, and thanks to the dark chips and the half Dutch cocoa, it has a depth and complexity to it that I haven't seen in any other creamy recipes. Now let's taste it. That is just so much more than chocolatey. It's intense, it's dark, it's mysterious, it's fruity, it's nutty. And then you pair that with this very silky, very luxurious ice cream base, and it just doesn't quit. The chocolatiness turns into fudginess, turns into ecstasy, guys. It's actually closer to like Italian dark chocolate gelato than it is American chocolate ice cream. Now to make this chocolate ice cream into pure sin, you'll need a special mix-in. For that, I'm gonna bake off a pan of my greatest of all time brownies. If you wanna make these and you think you can handle it, I'll throw the recipe video down in the description, but otherwise you can use any brownie that you think tastes good. Once the brownies are baked and cooled, I'll chop about 200 grams worth into 1-inch cubes, then throw them onto a plate and freeze for 1 hour so they're firm enough to stand up to the blade on the creamy. Next, I'll take about 100 grams of those frozen brownie chunks and top a pint of dark chocolate ice cream that I've already spun once and refirmed in the freezer for 20 to 30 minutes. Then I'll give that a quick spin with the mix-in setting, and now we've got an ice cream that you'll need to take a shower after eating. It's just so indulgent and so chocolatey and purely hedonistic. Like, you don't want people to watch you eat this ice cream because you're gonna make sounds that you don't want them to hear you make.
Oh.
The next flavor is the most underrated flavor of all time. Strawberry. But to get it really right so that it stands out on its own as a top 3 flavor, you really got to know how to use the berries the right way. To get started, I'll grab 350 grams or 12 ounces of very ripe strawberries. To determine whether or not they're ice cream worthy, you'll need to taste them. The ones that I've got are peak season June strawberries, so they're sickeningly good.
They're so juicy.
If all you have access to is off-season tart firm strawberries, you may want to skip this recipe for a few months or sub in some frozen tart cherries. Those tend to be pretty comparable in terms of moisture content, sweetness, and acidity, and they're available all year round. To prep these strawberries for the ice cream, I'll take a third of them, cut off the stems, then cut those down into quarters or 1-inch pieces. In total, I'll cut about 150 grams of the berries. Next, into those berries, I'll add 75 grams of sugar and 50 grams of vodka, or one little airplane bottle. These strawberries are going to be the ones that I use as mix-ins in the final ice cream to bring pops of a bright, fresh fruit flavor. But we need to replace their water with sugar and alcohol to keep them from getting icy. This is a move that I got from Max Felkowitz over at Serious Eats, and it's a great idea. It makes the strawberry ice cream much more strawberry. Once mixed together, I'm going to throw these strawberries into the fridge to macerate overnight, which is the same amount of time that the strawberry ice cream base will take to freeze. Speaking of ice cream base, to make that, I'm going to throw the rest of my strawberries, or about 200 grams worth, into my blender and then spin them into a smooth puree. Damn, I got it all over the ceiling. Make sure that this thing's covered up so you don't splatter red everywhere. And once this is spun up, the strawberries should look like melted sorbet. Next, I'll combine 400 grams of heavy cream and 200 grams of whole milk in a saucepan and then heat that over medium heat until it's about 190F. Then, just like I did for the vanilla and chocolate bases, I'm going to temper that hot cream into my custard base. For strawberry, that's going to be 6 large yolks, a pinch of salt, and 100 grams of sugar. Once things are tempered, the base is going to go back into my saucepan, and then that pan's going to go back over medium-low heat, and I'll cook this custard while stirring it constantly for about 3 to 4 minutes, or however long it takes for this to be brought up to 195F. And once I've got this custard thickened up, I'll need to stop the cooking, so I'll move it over to a medium bowl. Then I'll add in all of my fresh strawberry puree. Next, I'll add in about 6 to 7 drops of natural red food coloring to make this a little bit more emphatically red. I'm using the natural stuff that's made from red radish powder, so I think it's relatively safe compared to red 40 or whatever, but if you don't like this part, leave it out and have a whiter ice cream. Now, I'll just whisk the puree and red color into the cooked custard until things are well combined. Then the custard will get a 30-minute chill down in the fridge. Then I'm going to throw it into some pints and freeze it for at least 24 hours. The next day, before I spin this base, I'm going to drain the sugar vodka off my macerated strawberries. As you can see, they look basically the same. Now they're just saturated with sugar and alcohol, which act as a kind of antifreeze and will help these strawberries have a much better texture in the final ice cream. Next, I'm going to give my strawberry base a quick spin in the creamy. Then once it's spun, I'm going to add in 10 more drips of my food coloring and spin it one more time. If you add all of the food coloring to the ice cream base before freezing, it yields a much duller red color that's probably not even worth using food coloring for. I also don't add the food coloring right on top of the frozen block of ice cream because all of the color gets spun into the top inch and not really mixed in. And after the second spin, you can see this is beautiful ice cream.
Ooh, baby.
It's got a blush pinkness to it that I think just screams strawberry ice cream. Okay, now I need to freeze this ice cream for 30 more minutes to firm it up before I add in the macerated strawberries, because at this point it's been spun twice and it's getting a little bit melty. So after a 30-minute firm up in the freezer, I'll add in half of my frozen strawberries on top, then pop that pint into the creamy and hit the mix-in setting to chop those in. Now, if you want to do something crazy, and I mean really crazy, instead of fresh fruit, sub in chunks of frozen cheesecake. People are going to see you do that and think that you're psycho. They're going to back up. They're going to say, take this guy's keys. He can't drive. This is too much. He can't handle it. But the thing is, you can. You've been training for this. You started with the cookies. You graduated to the brownies. Now it's time to get into cheesecake. Just do it. And once the fruit's mixed in, it just looks so purely strawberry.
Ooh. Oh, baby.
For me, that is exactly what this ice cream should look like. It's light red, it's got little flecks of juicy tart berries spread throughout, and it is so creamy looking. Now let's taste it.
That is just so wonderful and fun and fresh. It's also super fruity and almost like juicy because the acidity from the strawberries makes your mouth just flood with saliva. What a weird way to say it. It just eats juicy, okay? It's very fruity, it's very fresh, and when you combine it with the rich creaminess from the custard, it tastes exactly like a good humor strawberry shortcake bar. It's nostalgic, it's delicious, it's beautifully pink. I'm thrilled. I love this ice cream.
If you guys like this video and you want another video where I show you well-tested recipes for food, here's a link to another. I hope you like it. See you there.